Hello, hello. Welcome to another floaty boat stream. So, today, the plan is to show you how to save your games. So you've made all these little games, and I just showed you yesterday, in about an hour, how you can make your little game into a big game, right? By adding a camera, and then you can use the camera to make like a larger world. One thing that I did want to say, to just kind of append onto that, was in your game, we said that this is like off the screen, right? This red box. So when we tell the canvas to draw this red box, it will still try to draw it even if it's off of the screen, because it's like technically still drawing it just in memory, not to your screen. So I will say the more things you add to your game outside of the screen, the more you'll want to add some checks to make sure that they'll actually be displayed before you draw them. Drawing is a really intensive process, and so we want to do that as little as possible. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in. So make sure you're checking that this would be within the camera's view before you go to draw it. But other than that, everything else still stands. Just wanted to throw that in before we started on our stuff today. So we're gonna try a handful of different things today. There's a lot of different ways that you can save your data in a game. I'm gonna start out with probably JavaScript. So let's get that up and let's get some music playing. Okay, let's make a new folder just because this is saving the game. Sure. Let's make a new file, index.html. Increase the size for you guys. And then let's open that in the browser. Well, let's host it just because we're going to need to host it later. We're just starting XAMPP, starting Apache, and then we'll open this, Let's go to localhost / saving the game. Okay, so now we're looking at this page we're editing. Let's open the terminal just because we don't have a favicon, so that's fine. Give me 1 second. I put on a jacket this morning and it's like suddenly feeling hot, but I did make coffee and stuff, so that's probably why. So I'll be right back. Okay, the jacket is off. So let's talk about saving your games. We're gonna start probably with JavaScript. So let's make some HTML here. And we're gonna do saving the game in basically a web format way, which is like JavaScript, PHP, all that stuff. And then we're also gonna show how to do it in Java in 2 different ways. And we will be involving a MySQL server and using SQL to save and load data. At least through some of the methods that we're using. If you are unfamiliar with MySQL or SQL, that's okay. You can use files or I think it's still files technically the other way that I'm going to show you. But anyway, there's other ways that you can save your game without knowing SQL. So if you don't want to dive into that right now, that's all right. I feel like nasally today. I wonder why. Anyway, saving the game. Let's make a body. Let's make a script. And we'll just do type, text, JavaScript, because we're not doing anything very large. Okay. So in JavaScript, we've been making things like a player, right? And we've been saying, well, his X position is 0, his Y position is 0. He has a width of like 32 or something, a height of like 32. He has things like health is like 100, all these different stats, right? Well, we want to keep these stats consistent, even if I choose to go to a different web page or close my browser and open it again. So how are we going to do that? Well, there's one way that is cookies, and hopefully, yeah, I have no cookies at the moment. So we have this thing called document.cookie. That's how you're going to access your browser's cookies. And we can set a cookie by saying document.cookie equals, and then I believe it follows the URL encoded format. So similar to if you were going to do a GET request, which is something we will also show in just a minute. But it's like a key value pair where I can say let's say X equals 0. And then we're going to say and maybe Y equals 0. I think we can do this and width equals 32 and height equals 32 and health equals 100. Give me 1 second. Okay. Sorry, my visitor dropped by, or a neighbor dropped by for a second. So I think that this will work. Let's try it out. So we refresh. It's unexpected token at here because this should be equals that. Let's refresh. document.cookie. Okay, so now we see this, right? So we just set a cookie with all those values. I want to pull up a reference real quick. Set cookie JavaScript, because I know there's a lot of things that you can do with cookies in JavaScript. Yes. So to set a cookie, you say document.cookie equals, and then it would be your key. So like hex, or let's do health because it makes more sense. Equals, you do the value. If this is a string, then you do not put it in quotes. You end it in a semicolon. Then you say max age equals, and I believe this is in milliseconds. That's what it looks like. Yeah, so this is its expiration date in milliseconds. So we could say like 3600 semicolon. And then you can also have a path. I believe slash is just the root path. But this will set a cookie that stores the health value. It has a lifespan of 1 hour, and then it's saved at this location on the user's computer. Well, in their browser, because the browser I think has like its own temporary root for cookies. But anyway, so this is the general layout. And then let's save it, refresh, document.cookie. Okay, now we have this other value here called health. It doesn't include the expiration and everything. It just separates by probably semicolons, if I had to guess. But this is very difficult to work with in a like programming fashion, because you'd have to make like a parsing function that's going to split up all of your cookie values and give you the value equals the key equals the value, that sort of pairing. And that's really annoying to do with cookies. So we actually, I want to say somewhat recently, came up with a different way to save data in JavaScript locally, like on a per page basis. Which is what I should say also is like cookies, and this way I'm about to show you, the data is stored only on the website that created the data. So if you went to like Google or something after you saved this information to your computer, Google's not going to have access to this stuff. Only your server is. So do not worry about like cross-site contamination of your data or anything like that. It is, theoretically impossible to do that. So the other way I wanted to talk about is local storage. It's something that we kind of came up with recently. We're gonna say set local storage JavaScript into our reference window. Okay. So local storage works a lot like cookies, but we made it easier to interact with. So local storage dot set item, and then we have a key and a value. Now I'm gonna say like hello is the key, and I don't know, like I am alive or something is the value, right? Hey Sam, how's it going? Hi man, sounds great. You stay safe too, bro. It's good to see you again. Okay, so this is how we're going to save a value. And let's just look at that. If I say local storage, now we see that we have something stored in it, right? It says hello, and it's equal to I am alive. So hello, I am alive. So that's cool. How do we get that information? Local storage dot, and it's get item, and you would just mention the key that you're looking for. And then you could set this equal to like, I could even say like player dot motto equals that or something, right? If I had like a motto value here. So like I could say it's hello, and then the player's motto is now going to be I am alive. So let's look at this. Local storage. We still have I am alive in the hello slot. And then if we look at player, the motto is now I am alive. But I didn't put that in here, right? But we put it here and then we loaded it into here from the local storage. So that is how you would theoretically store information in JavaScript by itself. I want to lower this music a little bit. Okay, I think that's better. So one thing to notice though is with local storage you can only store strings, and I believe cookies are the same way. So how would we store like a whole object if it's not a string? Well, what we can do is let's try and save this entire player, right? I guess I should also say there's also local storage dot clear, which should empty your local storage. So what if we want to store the entire player? Well, there's a data format called JSON. It's short for JavaScript Object Notation, and it looks a lot like this, a lot how we define objects in JavaScript. So it can be written as a string though, and that's kind of what we're going for. So what if I said let I guess I'll try and kind of explain it first. So we have a class called JSON, and there's a stringify function in it. And then anything that we put in here is going to be the JSON representation of it as a string. So if I said player here, it will write this player out as a string in a way that we can parse later. So let's just log player, and then we will log the stringified version and kind of see the differences here. So you'll see here we have like x is 0, width is 32, health 100, blah, blah, blah. And then underneath we have some text that kind of looks like the same information, right? But I can't expand it because it's just text. So this is what we want if we're going to be doing like cookies or storage or something. And so instead of doing something like local storage dot set item player is player, because this is not going to work. Let's just take a look at that real quick. Local storage. You see player is object, and this is not any information that we can use. We need the actual information of the player in there. So if we instead say that it's equal to this JSON stringify version of player, then when we look at it, storage, now you see player is equal to pretty much the same thing. There's a lot of backslashes in there to get rid of the quotes, but it contains all of the information we're looking for, right? So then we can say, well, I wanted the motto to be like hello or whatever. Let's just say hello world or something temporarily, and we're gonna save it in here so we can check the local storage, and we can see the hello world is stored in the local storage, right? So now let's delete this, and we'll comment this out so we're no longer setting it in local storage. If I refresh and go to local storage, you see that information is still there even though I deleted it. So that shows the consistency. It's not going to get deleted. Now let's do local storage dot get item player, and we're gonna say player equals this, but this is just going to be the string version of our player, right? And we need the JavaScript version of our player. So we need to undo this stringify. Well, there's also a function in JSON called parse. And if you use that function, it will take this string from JSON string and it will parse it back into a JavaScript object. And because we're setting player equal to that, it should replace all of this information with all of this information. So let's refresh. We're going to look at player this time, and we see player's motto is hello world. We didn't write that here, but now in a JavaScript version in memory, we have loaded the values that we had in our local storage into the game, right? So it is probably a lot more simpler than I'm kind of roundabout telling you guys, but essentially you can set an item and you can get an item, and that's saving and loading your data. And then you just need to kind of dance around with this JSON stuff in order to get the data into the correct format in order to save or load. But yeah, that saves us a lot of time. We don't have to write our own parsing function for cookies. I don't know why we don't have one to begin with. It seems like something that everyone's wanted for a long time, and we've just never added it to cookies. So I don't know what is up with that, you know. What's the next method we want to jump to? Those are the two like only JavaScript ways of saving data. But I will say it is also saved on the client side, which means as a developer, you have no access to it if you're hosting the files or anything. And it can be easily manipulated because it's on the client side. Pretty much anything that's done in JavaScript can be manipulated. Kind of want to show you guys something though, because let's just undo this delete. So we have this player, right? And you see that when I just open the console and type player, I can see all these values, right? I can even say like player.x equals 60 or something. And then when I check player, I've changed this value. Well, as a programmer, I didn't want that value changed, but the user changed it anyway, which can allow them to cheat, right? Well, maybe I want to put something kind of in the way of them doing that. Well, we can do a self-invoking function, and you would like, have update and like render, all that stuff in here, right, as well, if you were making a game. Well, I don't want them to call render. I don't want them to call update. I don't want them to mess with players' values. Well, what we can do is we can wrap this inside of a scope of a function, and that function will not have a name. So they can't call this function by themselves because it's nameless, but it also runs automatically. It's called a self-invoking function. And it starts with this, And then I believe it's like that. I believe this is the notation for it. So you're self-invoking a function. This is the inside of the function. This is the end of the like wrap of it. And then this actually runs the function. So we're going to say like console log hello. We're going to refresh and it says hello. So I did it properly. Now you're thinking, what are we going to do with this? Well, instead of just hello, we're actually going to cut all of this and throw it in here. So now when we refresh the page, we don't see anything. Perhaps we should do something like console log player.health or something like that and refresh. So we see that player health still exists in the game, right? But if I say player and push enter, it says player is not defined. Okay, well, what about like player.health? Player is not defined. That's because it's inside a layer of scope now that we can't access from this console. So if you want a little layer of protection, then you can use this self-invoking function, just wrap all of your code in it so that they can't touch anything that's inside of here. But as you can see, you can have functions inside of a function. You can call things statically inside of a function. You have these objects inside of a function. You can put anything you want inside of this invoking function, and it will still work as intended. So that's a little layer of security there. But just know it's still running client side and people can do anything that they want client side. So it's not a perfect security solution that's going to solve all your problems. This is just to prevent like 90% of people from getting at your code, but 10% will still know how to manipulate it. Okay. So that was purely JavaScript. Let's jump to some PHP and HTML. So let's make a, let's rename this index.html file. We're going to call it index.php. And this is important because we're going to be using PHP. In order to use PHP, it must be hosted on a PHP supporting server. I'm using Apache currently. So, and you must access it through your like hosted address. You can't just open the file in Chrome. But yeah, now that we've covered kind of the requirements of PHP, let's talk about how PHP works a bit. So you're going to have these tags. And what do these mean? Well, this means we're starting PHP here, ending PHP here. And then we can write PHP code inside here. So let's try like echo. This is a test. Hopefully this works. It did. Okay. So we have PHP up and running properly. Now, PHP runs on your server before it serves the rest of the page to the client. And we can do a lot of different things with PHP, including manage variables, connect to databases, all that stuff. Lower the volume even a little bit more. Okay. So we can even say like $ player name or something equals Joe. And then this is just in memory on the server, but what if I want to make like a paragraph here? And then I could put some PHP tags here as well. We can put these PHP tags anywhere we want. And I'm going to say echo $ player name semicolon. And what this is going to do is it's going to put Joe on the page because it's getting this player name variable here and it's just spitting it out on the page right here. That's what echo does. You could also use print, which is a function way of writing it. There's not really a big difference between echo and print, just kind of how you write it, really. It's sort of just preference. I generally use print, but sometimes I'll write echo. Doesn't make a huge difference. So that's cool, but what if we want it in JavaScript? Well, let's make the script tag. What if I just said let player name equals in quotes? Then we need these quotes because printing or echoing is not going to include the quotes here. Then we're just going to open some PHP right here and we're going to say echo player name. And this will also only work if your JavaScript is in the same file as your PHP. So let's refresh. We have Joe on the page. Well, what if down here in the console, I say player name? Well, now it says Joe, right? And we didn't define that in JavaScript, and this console only accesses our JavaScript variables. So that means we successfully set this JavaScript variable from PHP, right? So there's a lot of cool things you can do with PHP. We're only really going to touch on like 2 of them. So one of them is file put contents. And then I believe this is a file name. We're going to say test.txt. And then this is the text you want to put inside of it. So we're going to say, instead of putting a string here, let's just say player name. Okay. Maybe we'll call it like name.txt. Okay, so what happens when I load this page now? Well, I didn't see anything happen, but if I open our XAMPP hosted htdocs, which I think I can get through from here. Yeah. And I open Z again. I bring this over here and we look at saving the game. Now we have name.txt, and that wasn't there before. You also see it in here. If we open it, we see Joe. So that means we wrote a file named name with the value Joe in it. Well, what if we changed Joe to be like Steve, and then we refresh the page again? Well, if we look in it now, it says Steve, right? So you can save data like that. Well, what if I want to retrieve the data? File, get contents, and we're going to say name.txt. But we should probably store this as like a variable. So we're going to say loaded is that. And then instead of printing the player name, why don't we print loaded so that we can actually see what was put into this variable here. Let's refresh. Now you see it says Steve because we are putting Steve into the name.txt and then we're loading Steve from the file, and because we loaded Steve, now loaded is equal to this. Let's get rid of this, and we'll get rid of this as well. Let's just change this to like boo or something like that, right? So now we shouldn't be writing it. We shouldn't be making the variable at all. We should just be loading what's in there and putting it on the page. And then we can get rid of this script tag for now. It says boo. So we know that it's successfully just loading whatever's in this file and putting it into this variable here. So this is really nice. You can use like file structures to save certain data. You can have like folders that's like player, and then inside of player, you can say like health, and you can put the health inside of a text file or something. And like it doesn't have to be a text file either, but it is going to be a text file as far as like meme type and stuff, if you know about that. But yeah, this is a really quick way that you can just spit information into a file and then load the information. And we need a way, though, that we can get our game data into PHP, right? So there's a couple different ways that you can do it. Number one is forms. So we're going to make a form, and we're going to make some inputs. And we might as well give them some labels. Type is text. Type is text. And then we need to give these names. This is going to be like username or something. And then maybe like health, something like that. And let's add those titles to our labels. And I'm just doing some basic HTML to make it look a little bit better maybe. And then we need some way to submit this form. So we're going to make a submit type input. And we're going to say its value is save or something like that. Okay. So this form has a couple attributes. We have a method and we have an action. And then there's also an enc type. We're not going to worry about this for now. This would be if, let's say you wanted to upload an image or something, then you'd need a different encryption type for this. But if we're just doing data to like save a game, we don't really need to worry about it. The default encryption type will work perfectly fine. For our method, we have pretty much two options. We have post and we have get. I'm going to leave it on get for now to try and show you this. And then action is, where are we sending this information? Which page are we sending it to? Well, in this instance, we're sending it to index.php. And I believe I could write index.php, but because it's the same file that the form is in, we can actually just get rid of this action and it will submit it to the same file we're currently on. So let's refresh our page and take a little look at this. So now we have a username and we have a health, right? So what if I say Bob and I say we're at like 1000 health? Well, when I push save, the page does like a quick refresh, right? And then we can see in the URL, question mark, username equals Bob and health equals 1000. Okay, I didn't write that. It just kind of appeared there, right? Well, that's what submitting a get form does, is it puts it into the URL here for us to process on the back end. So in PHP though, now we can check the values of these. So we can say if, first of all, not empty. So this makes sure that there is a value here. So if we don't write username equals, then we won't have a value. So if we do not have an empty value, meaning we do have a value of $_get brackets parentheses username, then open the if statement. This $_ is like a global variable in PHP, and we're getting the $_ under get global variable, which means all of the values that have been submitted through a get request, which is what we're doing here, are going to be stored in an array, and we're accessing that array with the key of username. So in the array where we have username, we're going to get the value of that. If that is not empty, then we're going to do something with it. So for now, I'm just going to say echo $_get username. And we'll refresh. And you see Bob shows up here. I never submitted the form, but we still have it in the URL, right? So let's get it out of the URL for now. And it went away. Now if I say like Joe, and you have like 5 health, and I click save, now it says Joe because Joe was put up here and your health is 5. But we're not doing anything with the health yet. Okay, so that's cool. Why would you want it in the URL? Well, if it's in the URL, you can do things like bookmark it. So next time you go to the bookmark, it's going to load all of these values into your game automatically. But the other way I'm going to show you, you can't bookmark because it's like a one-time thing. And that's post. And then up here, you're also going to have to change get to post. And save. Let's go back to here. Okay, so we have no values in the URL. We have nothing being printed on the page. So we know that there's like no variables being set, right? So what if I said Tony and he has a health of 7, and then I save it? Well, we see Tony, but Tony's not in the URL. So how did it get this, right? Well, post is sort of a like hidden submission, and we can see it if we go look at our network. If we go to saving the game, we look at our, where would be our request information? I can't remember. It's likely payload is where we're looking at it. So basically we sent the page or the server Tony and 7, right? And then in the background, it's like, okay, we got Tony, we got 7, let's do whatever we need to do, let's give it back. And then we got our response with Tony here. But like I said, if I bookmarked this URL or something, and I click it here again, that information's gone. If I went to that bookmark later, we did not save that information at all. So if you want to save the information by like URL, then I would use a GET request. However, post is nice for things that require more security, like a password, because you don't want your password up in the URL. Like that's unsafe, right? So you use post for things like that, and then you can use get for, other values. Now, let's stay on post for now. Just understand that we are submitting this data and it's being processed and then sent back to us. The next thing we should probably jump to is a MySQL database. Now, I have not opened this yet, and I don't remember if there are security things in place. So I'm just going to move this off screen when I open it. And we're going to check this out real quick. So if I start MySQL, I'm going to allow it. If I go to my admin page, is there anything scary here? I don't think so. Okay. So let's move this back over here. So in your server, if you're using XAMPP like me, you can start a MySQL server. You can also do this with like a MariaDB server or a PostgreSQL server. I'm just going to click admin and it will take me to localhost / PHP+MyAdmin. Now, if you don't have this admin button, you can just go to this location if you have PHP+MyAdmin installed, and it'll do a similar thing. Let's make a new database in here. It's upset. Okay. It like crashed for some reason. That was interesting. So we're going to create a database and we're going to call this like stream, something like that, just generic. We'll say create. So now we've created this database called stream. We need to make a table in the database. Let's just call it main. And I'll give it 3 columns because that's what we are working with currently. Now, let's kind of maximize this. We have some data to go through. We're going to have an ID. We said username and health, right? Now, health can be an integer. Username is going to have to be what's called a varchar, which is a variable length character or a string, basically. And we'll give it a length of 255. This is like how many characters in the string there are. Now, let's tick A_I. That's not artificial intelligence or whatever. It stands for auto increment, as you can see in that little pop-up there. And what this is going to do is every time we add something to this table, it's going to give it a unique ID. And that's one thing that's really useful in SQL. And we're not going to dive too deep into SQL, but this is really good practice to do, have this ID column and have it auto increment. Now, I believe we could say it can't be null or it can be null. We're going to say it can't be null for now. I think we're just going to proceed. So let's save it. And now if we look at main, we have an ID, a username, and health column. But there's nothing in it because we haven't written anything to this database. Well, in order to write things to the database, we have to connect to it first. And what better language to connect to it than PHP? So PHP, you can say, like, I want a connection variable. We're going to set it equal to a new MySQL I. It used to be MySQL, now it's MySQL I is the new class we use for it. You're going to give it the host. You can say localhost. You're going to give it a username and password. Now we haven't set this up yet, so let's check this out. For our stream database, we need to look at privileges, and we need to add a user account. This user account is going to be specific to this database. Let's call him Bob, and we'll say any host password hello, hello, hello. Okay. And we want to give him all privileges on this database. If you don't want all privileges, you can tweak it. These are global privileges down here. So this would be all of your databases. We don't want to give him that. So it looks good so far. Let's go to next. Change your password. It's a dangerous password. Shut up, Chrome. Okay, so database specific privileges. This is what our guy is going to have access to on our database. He can select, insert, update, delete, create, alter, all this stuff. And we want to allow that for now. So we're going to say go. And we have updated all of them. So now we have this database. We have a table named main, and we have a user that can access this. So we said the username was Bob. We said the password was hello. And then we're going to need to access a table. And we're going to pick main as our table. Okay. Now, there's a couple different ways to test if this works. I think one way is like or die. We can say like oops. And we're going to delete this for now because we're trying to get connected to the database. So if this page loads, which it did not, access was denied for Bob to database main. Why might that be? So let's go back to our privileges. We do have Bob. He has all privileges from any host. We did say hello was the password, right? That's interesting. Well, that kind of puts a bit of a kink in our plans. Oh, because we have no main database. We have a stream database. So this isn't the table, it's the database. Now if we look at it, now it loads. Okay, we're good. So, oops, as I was saying. So now we're connected to this stream database, right? Well, now we can run some SQL. I'm just gonna get rid of this die because it's going off the page and bothering me. There's two ways of interacting with a database using PHP. One is the standard just kind of SQL query thing. We can say like select all from, oh, we should probably insert something first. How about just raw in the table? Let's make a new insert. And we're just gonna call it test and 0. How about that? Oh, this is not that. There. Okay. So now when we look at main, we have an ID of 1, we have username test and health 0, right? Well, what if I say select all from main, and then we want to do a query. So we're going to say con query, and then I'll just put our SQL in here. And I believe we need to set that equal to another variable called like result or something. And then we need to loop through what we fetched. So we'll say while, oh my gosh, shile. While result num rows is greater than 0, which it should be, then, oh my gosh, I'm like all over the place. If num rows is greater than 0, then we're going to say while $row equals $result, fetch association echo $row, we'll say username. Let's copy this because we want the health and the ID as well. Hopefully I've written this correctly. I have. Okay. So a lot of stuff was just written that you might not understand. We're gonna go over it right after I ban a bot. Let's also just do an echo BR between these so that it looks a bit cleaner. We forgot some semicolons. Semicolons are absolute in PHP. You have to have them. So, what are we doing? We are connecting to our database, which, as you saw, if you have the incorrect information, you will get some kind of error. It won't work. We are just making a string, which is going to be a SQL query. And in this query, we did this. We selected everything from our main table, right? And then I just fed that into this con query. And whatever the result was, I stored in result. Now, result, your query is going to have some default settings that have been set up from the query that you did. One of them is num rows. It's going to tell you how many rows of this table it was able to fetch. And I say, if it's greater than 0, meaning we found some rows, then what we're going to do is we're going to say, essentially, for each row that is in this table, we're going to make a row variable, and we're going to put all of its columns inside of that row variable's array. So then you can call row and call the key of the value you're looking for, like ID, username, or health, and it will give you the value that it got this iteration around. So then we just echoed it to the page, which is why it's here now. So 1 is the ID here. Test is the username here. And 0 is the health right here. So ID, username, health, just like that. So we successfully loaded information from the database this way. Let's put some information into it. Okay, well, let's say we have some game variables that perhaps we are getting from this form. That sounds like a good idea, right? Because we can use forms on the page and we can interact with the page using JavaScript. So we can all kind of have a streamlined connection between all of these languages that way, right? So let's do if $_post, and down here we said username. So username, if it's not empty, then we want to do this. So if it's not empty, then we want to make some SQL. We're going to say insert into main values. And then inside of here, we need to put the values of what was submitted, right? Hey, Gatuno, what's up? Hope your day's going well. So in here, we would normally say the username or the health value and like an ID. If I remember correctly, do insert into with auto increment. There is a like default that we can put in here. Oh, okay, I was missing something. So here we need to put the column names. So we would say we're going to insert into username and health. So username and health. We're doing like this. Okay. And then values is going to match the order you put in here. So we would want to put the username. So like $_post username and $_post. And this would be the health one we're submitting, right? But because we have all of these different quotes and things, sometimes PHP can get a bit confused as to where our string starts and ends and where variables are. So what you can do is you can cut this, close the string, use dots, and paste there. And then you're going to do the same thing here. You're going to cut, put quotes, put dots, paste. So dots are how we concatenate strings in PHP. So essentially we're saying we want this string plus the value from username. And then we want this string plus the value of this, and then that. Now we might need to add some like semicolons here, or sorry, single quotes, because we are trying to put a string into the database. And so we'll need to surround it with quotes. Okay, now that we've written some SQL to get information into it, and we're dynamically changing this information depending on what was submitted, right? Then we can do a similar thing. We can say con query the SQL. Now we don't need to worry about getting anything out of it, so we don't need to set this equal to any variables or anything. Let's just quote this bit out for now, and let's kind of see if that works. So we're going to refresh the page, and we see nothing is on the page. And if we check our database table, nothing has been added or removed or anything like that, right? So what if I say Steven and he has 500 health. And then I click save. Well, we don't see anything happening, right? But let's check our table. If I click main, now Steven is in here with 500 health, right? Because we inserted the values that we put in this form into this table. So now Steven's in here. Well, I can fetch information as well, and I can fetch it through a variety of different means. So instead of just printing everything out, which I believe if I do this right now, yeah, we get 1 test 0, 2 Steven 500. So it's just spitting out everything that's in this table kind of randomly, right? Let's add another BR at the end just to keep those separate. Let's even make a bit of identifier for us here. We're going to say ID, username, and health, right? So now we have some kind of titles next to them. We know the ID of 1's username is test, health is 0, ID of 2, username Steven, health is 500, right? So that matches up with what's in here. Well, what if I only want Steven's information? I don't want this test data that we made. Well, I can change this select information here. Thank you. Sorry, looking at Word 75. Thank you for following. I really appreciate it. I believe we are exactly halfway to our goal now of getting to affiliate. I really appreciate it. That is our goal at the moment, is affiliate. I am just trying to help people basically realize their dreams of making video games. I just have some spare time and I know how to do it, so I thought I would teach everybody. But thanks, man. That means a lot. Also, if you are on Kick, Kick was not working yesterday, so you missed the stream yesterday. I did stream, but you missed it. If you want to watch it, you can either watch it on Twitch or you can watch it on the YouTube. We discussed how to manipulate a camera. Okay, so what we were talking about was we're getting all this information. We just want Steven's information, right? Well, we can adjust this query here where we're fetching the information. And I can say I want to select everything from main where, and in this case, our easiest identifier is going to be the username, right? So I can just say username equals, and then I want it where it's equal to Steven. So Steven. Okay. Now when we refresh, we broke it. Awesome. We might need quotes around here. That could be the problem. Let's try that out. Okay, we did need the quotes around Steven. But now we are only getting Steven's information because the logic is we're selecting everything from main. So we're going to our main table and we're grabbing everything except only where the username is Steven. Okay, well, the username is Steven. So we're only grabbing everything in this row, which is going to be all of Steven's information, right? Okay, so that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. Well, similarly, we could do like his ID, right? We could say where his ID is 2. And this is more common. We're going to get the same information, but we're accessing it by the ID instead of the username. Now, why am I like suddenly showing you all of this PHP stuff and saving information to databases and loading them from databases if we've been working primarily in Java and JavaScript, right? Well, that's because you can interact between JavaScript and PHP to create a more, let's say, like dynamic way of using PHP. And I'm going to show you that now. But I would definitely play around with SQL and MySQL. You can do a lot with MySQL and SQL servers. But we're gonna cut pretty much all of this for now. I think we'll probably keep the fetching bit, but we have some values in our database now. Let's kind of think about this stuff later. Okay, and let's get rid of this form because we wanted a more dynamic game, right? Let's make some script tags. Type is text / JavaScript. Okay, so let's just set up a quick game here. We have a canvas. The ID is canvas. The width is 900. The height is 600. Let's throw some quick styling. I think I will just give it a border instead of doing all the background stuff we've been doing. So we'll just say border 1 pixel solid black. And then we'll say margin 15 pixel auto 0 auto. And then display block. And let's take a look at that. Okay. So we have our canvas that we keep playing around with, right? Let's make some quick functions and things. Function update. Function render. Set interval. Function. 1000 divided by 60. We have update and then render. And then let's make a little player that is going to have x of, we'll say like 15, y of 15, width of 50, and height of 50. And then let's render this guy. We're gonna clear the rectangle of the entire canvas. Offset width, canvas offset height, right? And I actually need to create our references to the canvas. Document get element by ID canvas. Let can equal canvas get context 2D. Okay. Now let's draw the player after we set a fill style to be blue. Fill rect player.x, player.y, player.width, player.height, right? Okay. All of that to get a little square here. But the game is updating 60 times per second and drawing 60 times per second, and we have some values for our player, right? So I want us to be able to move, right? So let's add some listeners for keys. Document and on key down is a function. And let's make a controls object. We'll say left, false, right, false. And then I like doing up false, down false. Okay. So if key code is, then we're gonna do something. And let's put E in here. And for now, we're gonna say console log key code. And let's get our values. So up, down, left, right. So 87, but it is a number, not a string. Paste. So up, down, left, and right, which is W, S, A, and D. And then we said controls.up is true. Controls.down is true. Controls.left is true. Controls.right is true. And then we're going to copy this entire thing, paste it down here, say on key up, and we're going to change all these to be false. Okay, now in update, we're going to say player.x plus equal if controls.up, then player.y minus equal, we'll say 5 for now. If controls.down, player.y plus equals 5. If controls.left, player.x minus equals 5. If controls.right, player.x plus equals 5, right? So this should give us some pretty default movement. I can get rid of this console log now because we already have our keys defined. So now we can move around the page, right? That's cool. Every time we refresh the page, though, we're going to go back to where we started. We don't want this. We want to be able to move to like the center, refresh the page, and still be at the center, right? Well, the only way that we've seen, other than saving information locally in like local storage or cookies, is with PHP. But PHP needs to refresh the page, right? And we don't want our game to refresh the page just to save and load information. Like, that's really annoying, right? So, I'm going to show you something kind of cool that you can do. Let's make another file. We're going to call this save.php. Sure, install the PHP extension. That sounds nice. Maybe we'll get some highlighting now. So we had this PHP here. Let's just cut all of it from this index file and paste it into this save file, right? Now, the only time that this information is going to be processed is when we go to save.php. So if I save and I say /save.php, now we're grabbing Steve's information, right? That's cool, but now we're away from our game. In order to go back to our game, we have to go to index.php, and now we don't have access to the information anymore because it's a different page, right? Well, with JavaScript, we can kind of tie these pages together. So let's go and look at how we might do that. Underneath our game logic, let's just write some new stuff. There is something that we created called fetch. And the fetch API allows us to load a page in the background of our current page and do things with it. So we're going to say, I believe it has to be an async function. And we're going to call it, what do we want to call it? We'll just call it test for now, I suppose. So what is the difference between a function and an async function? Basically you can use async methods inside of an async function. And I'm being honest, I don't entirely know what the difference is. So you're gonna have to play with it and figure out what the differences are. In my experience, you can basically throw async on any function and it'll still perform appropriately. But I'm sure there's probably some overhead or something that it probably takes longer to create an async function than a regular function. But this allows us to use fetch. And fetch is really cool. You can give it a URL, like let's say save.php, and it will get that information for us. But it uses a promise system, kind of similar to like a lot of Node's sort of programming stuff, if you're familiar with Node. If you're not, just know that we're going to have to await what this is fetching. And then we need a dot then, which is going to say, essentially, I don't know why I opened braces. It's going to say essentially, after we grab this page, we want to do something with it, right? Well, we need to say, what was the layout of this again? I'm going to Google it real quick, so I'm not just talking out of my ass. Fetch JavaScript. Okay, so we have dot then, and this is going to be the response, and we need an arrow function of doing something. And then we can also tack another dot then onto the end of here, which is going to be the data that we're getting. And we're going to do something with the data. And we can tack a catch onto the end here, which is going to handle any errors that we run into. And that's the general structure of a fetch. I believe this can work locally. We might need to do a full URL. But we'll figure it out as we go. So this response, this is going to be like our response codes and things. We need to make sure that this is working properly. So let's do console log response. And we'll just go with that for now, and we'll see what happens. If I refresh, nothing happened. Let's go look at network and see. We're never calling this function, so let's call it. Okay, so we got a response. Let's look at this response. It has a body, it has some headers, it has OK, it has status. Status is what we're looking for right now. So we need to say if the status is 200. You could also say if status OK. So if status dot OK, that would give you a similar check here. then we're going to do something with this. However, if we are okay, we're going to return, we're going to return the data that we got from the page, which would be response. This should be response. And this would have been response.status is 200. Sorry, I'm getting a little turned around. So if response.status is 200, or if response.ok, then we're going to return response dot, and there's a couple different things we can call here. I believe we can say HTML, or we can say JSON, depending on how we want to get the information. For now, we're going to say HTML or even text. Let's do text for now. And then else, we're going to throw an error, which was like response not okay or something like that. And here we'll just console log the error. So how this is going to work is we're going to fetch this page, right? We're going to check that the response code was okay or 200 or whatever we're looking for. If it is, we're going to return the text that we found in that response. That text is going to go in here and be called data. But if we don't get this response okay code, we're going to throw an error. And this error is going to be caught by this catch here and do whatever's in here. And I gave it a custom text here saying the response was not okay. So it should log that the response was not okay if there's an error. Otherwise, let's say console log data. Let's try that out. Let's refresh. Okay, what do we see here? We see ID2 BR, username Steven BR, health 500 BR. That's the information that we're printing on the save page, isn't it? Let's go to localhost, saving the game, save.php. And we don't see the BRs, but they are there. See, we have the BRs. So ID2 BR, username Steven BR, health 500 BR. So we are getting what is on that page inside of JavaScript while being on a different page. So essentially, we've loaded a page inside of this page, just in the background. Well, we can do things with this information, can't we? First of all, let's go to our save.php, and instead of just echoing this stuff onto the page, why don't we make an object? And I am going to need to remember how to do that. We're going to say player is a new object, I think. PHP create object. Let's just take a little look at it. Okay, it's not object. It's standard class. Because we just want to make a generic empty object here. Now, instead of echoing, I said, let's add these values to this object. So $player, and we're going to say username equals this, okay? And then we'll say $player, and I guess this would be ID, right? Username is this. And then player health is this. So in PHP, we use this arrow in the same way that we use a dot in JavaScript to access the inside of an object. And this is just PHP's way of writing it. So we're making an empty object, and then in that object, where we're looking at, what was it, Steven's information? We're saying we want to set Steven, like the player's ID to be Steven's ID, the player's username to be Steven, and the player's health to be Steven's health, right? And then we can do something interesting. We can print JSON underscore encode, and then we can just say player here. So this looks kind of similar to the parsing stuff in JSON we were doing in JavaScript earlier, but this is PHP's way of doing it. So we're taking this object and we're going to write the object into a string in a way that JSON understands it, right? So if I just go and reload this now, this is what the information looks like that we're spitting out now. It's got some braces, it's got the quotes. This is how it looked in JSON format. Now we're printing this out in JSON format. So what does it look like over here? Well, it looks the same way, right? But this is a string. We can't do anything with a string. So let's go back here. What if instead of text, we say JSON? And then when we get the response, we're going to process it as though it were JSON, and we're going to log it, okay? So let's refresh. Well, now it's looking like it's an object in memory, right? It's got a username Steven, ID of 2, health is 500. Like, this looks usable. So what if we change some of our structure in our table, right? Let's go look at our tables and let's just get rid of main altogether. Let's just drop it. Where might I do that? Is that under structure? Let's do some searching. Okay, we can do it here. Let's just drop this main table here. Yes, destroy that table. Let's make a new table. Let's call it main again. And we want an X, a Y. What else do we need? Our game. We were getting, I think we just need X and Y, really. Okay. I think we'll just do that. So let's make a table that has 3 columns. Okay. We're going to have an ID that, again, is going to auto increment. You'll have an X and we will have a Y. And these are going to be probably doubles. I don't want an integer. Can integers store doubles? It probably can. Let me Google. Can int in MySQL store double? It cannot store a double. Store. There's no list to meet requirements. or decimal in SQL. Decimal. That's what we're looking for. So this will be int, this will be decimal, this will be decimal, or maybe float. Oh, there is double. I just skipped over it. Okay. So let's save that. Now in our main table, we have an ID, an X, and a Y. So let's just insert something manually ourselves. We're gonna say 0, 0. Now we check main, and we have ID 1 is 0, 0, right? Okay. Well, let's see if that loads here. We have an empty array. That's because we are looking for ID 2. There's only one ID in our database now. So let's look for 1 instead. And then instead of ID, instead of username, let's do X and Y and X and Y. That should grab all the information we're looking for. Let's take a look at these. Okay, so we have an ID, we have an X and a Y, right? And those are getting pulled from the database now. Now, let's say when we get this data back, instead of just logging it, what if we said player.x equals x and player.y equals y, but it's going to be data dot, and I think that might work. Let's change some of these values to be a little bit off. Let's make it like 100 by 100. Okay, so now when it fetches it, we'll get 100, 100, and then we're gonna update the player's location equal to that data, right? So now we've been shifted, because even though our default is 1515, we're going to later fetch this information and update our X and Y equal to what we grabbed, which is 100, 100. So now we're at 100, 100, right? Now that's cool. That's like essentially how you would load data, but we need to save the data too. So how about when we move, or just in general, when we update, what if we say save data, something like that, and we'll make a new function called save data, and we need to be able to save our data. Well, we're going to do a very similar thing. This is going to be an async function. We're going to grab this code because we're going to do essentially the same thing. We don't need to process the data after we send it, so we can get rid of that bit. And then we need to change some values here. I'm just Googling some stuff, make sure I'm doing this right. Okay. So in fetch, you can also include an object. And in this object, we can have a method that we can say is post. We can set some headers if we want to. We're going to set a body. But what is this body going to be equal to? Well, we kind of need to structure our own body. So let's say let data equal an object, okay? And then we'll say, just for this situation, how about we just say the ID is 1. We'll say the X is player.x and the Y is player.y. So every time we call this, it should get the players X and Y. And then for the body, we need to JSON stringify the data here. And that should pretty much work. We don't need to do anything if it's okay. Let's see, if it's not okay, then we'll throw the error. So we're not trying to get anything back from this. So I believe that will work. We're going to do a different file though. Let's change this save to be load. Let's rename this. So now it's loading. Let's make a new file that we're going to call save. And we're going to get the same information from load into save, because we're going to do something similar, but instead of selecting, we're going to get if not empty. We're writing a similar thing to what we had before. If X isn't empty, you'd normally check for all of them. So like ID, X, Y. I don't want to do that because it's going to take a lot of time. Then we want to do our querying stuff. So we're going to update because it already exists in our database. We're going to update main. We're going to set X equals Y equals where ID equals, okay? And we need to get the values from our posts and stuff, right? So let's do quote, dot space, quotes, dot space, and quotes, dot space. Right there. Except for we don't need this last quote, so we'll just do this. So $underscore post X $underscore post Y. Don't know why I can't type right now. And then we're gonna do $underscore post of the ID. So where our ID is whatever ID we submitted, we're going to update our main table setting X equal to our submitted X and Y equal to our submitted Y. And then we're just going to run that query, right? Then we don't need this stuff. We're not planning on returning anything from the page. And then we'll go back here and we are doing it to save. We're posting it. Make sure that post or get is equal to whatever you're checking for here. And let's see what this does. Let's just run it. Unexpected token, semicolon, at here. That's because it's an object. So we don't want a semicolon here. Let's refresh again. Okay. Now I took a step and we disappeared. What happened? Well, we have like an infinitely high number of x and y. Why might that be? Well, we're adding and then we're saving the data. I think it's because we are making these into strings when we load them. So instead of saying it equals this and it equals this, we need to make these into integers. I believe that is just this. Parse double. Okay, let's do a parse float on this and a parse float on this. And let's just comment this out for now. Okay, so now if we look at player, these are actually numbers. They're not strings. So let's try saving it again. Okay, so now we're moving around, right? And if I refresh the page, we're not jumping back to the position that we were at. So I don't think that our save is working. We are sending the X and Y, but it doesn't appear to be updating in our database. So maybe we're not receiving this information properly. Let me go back and look at this post. Okay, let's do it this way, because I know it'll work this way. Let's comment this out for a second and reload so my computer's not killing itself. Instead of making the object here, let's make a form data object. So form data equal new form data. And we don't need to do a form here. Create form data. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. So we need to make a form data. Then we're going to say form data dot append. We're going to add some things to this form data we just made. What if I just said ID is going to be 1, form data append, x is going to be player.x, form data append y is going to be player.y. And then instead of body being this stringified data that I was unsure if it was going to work to begin with, but that's what Google told me to do, we can say form data, I believe. Yes, I believe that will work. Okay, so now let's try and add this save back. See if it works. So we're moving. If I refresh, it's still not saving. Why might that be? We know we're sending this information correctly, but we're getting, you have an error in your SQL context. Check manual corresponds syntax where y equals 100. Oh, I believe I need a comma. Like right here. Yes, that was our problem likely this whole time. So let's try the other way too then. So this is working with the form data version. Let's go back to having the JSON stringify and the object here. And we uncomment this, refresh, we're moving around, we refresh, and it does not appear to have updated. So if you're going to do it, I recommend, there's like a redo thing. We're gonna have to write this again. I recommend doing the form data method. It's the way that I've always done it. And I know how it works, and it works well. Append ID is going to be one data append x is player.x and form data append y is player.y, and then this was one data, and it is not there. Okay, so now it is working. We can move around anywhere that we stop. If I refresh the page, it'll still be there when we get back to the page because we're updating the location in the database to where we currently are using this save that we're running every frame. And then whenever we start the page, it's going to run this test, which we should probably call like load. And it's going to run this once. It's going to go get our information, and it's going to spawn us wherever the database says we are. But when we move, then it's going to change the information in the database. So the next time we fetch it and we reload, it's going to move us here immediately when the game starts. So that is like the basics of saving information, loading information from a database. You can do this with the files too, just in the load and save instead of getting it from a database. You would just print in JSON encoded format whatever you pulled from those files. So you'd make your object, and then you would just load all of the values into the object, and then you would just print the JSON encoded object, right? And then save is a similar thing. You'd probably listen for these posts, and then you would like file put contents here instead of updating the database, right? So that's the basics of that. Let's look at something else that I want to talk about. I kind of want to keep this to maybe put in the GitHub, because this would be like a working version of it, right? So how about we just delete name since we weren't using it? And I just want to show you guys prepared statements. Prepared statements. New file, index.php. Okay, so kind of straying from this game development stuff for a minute, because I've already shown you how to save and load through a combination of HTML, JavaScript, and PHP with a MySQL backend. I'm even gonna drop this database because I'm never gonna use it. Operations, maybe? Yeah, drop the database. Yes. Okay. Oh, I needed that, actually. Now that I think about it, I'm sad. Let's go set up a database again. We'll call it stream. In stream, we're gonna make table main, and I just need, like, I guess we'll do 3. We'll say int, not int, ID, name. We'll say like nickname or something. Varchar 255, and we need this auto incrementing. Okay, save. All right, let's go look at privileges, make sure that that's set up right. We still have Bob, so we're good there. Okay, let's look at some PHP real quick. We've been saying con equals new MySQL I. We said localhost with username Bob, password of hello, and we were accessing the stream database. So let's go from saving the game to prepared statements. And we don't get an error, so we know we're probably connecting properly. And we said we wanted to make some SQL of select all from main. And then we said on query our SQL. We are going to store that in a result. Oh my gosh, I cannot type for anything. And then if result numRows is greater than 0, then while row equals result fetch association, then we're going to print row. And here we had, I think, username and nickname. And let's get the ID in here too. And then we need to add a BR after all of these, just to kind of space it out, right? So we have nothing in our main table at the moment. Let's insert something into it. Name, floaty boat, nickname, we'll just say floaty. Okay. Now we have one floaty boat and floaty. If we refresh, we get a warning because it is name, not username. Okay, so one floaty boat and floaty, which is what we have in our table here. Now, this works, but there's a better way to do this. If, let's say, let's say we got an underscore post of name or something, right? So we'll just say $ submitted equals floaty boat. Okay. And then we want to select all from main where the name is, and it's going to be our submitted value here, right? So again, this should still work because we're going to look for where floaty boat is. We're going to get all the information from that, and then we're going to print it out. And we get floaty boat's name, and then we grab all of its information and print it out. That's great. But this is very insecure. Where like just appending a string, this could be equal to anything, right? What if I said where the name is, I don't know, like Joe, or the name, or just like or true or something. I don't know. We make some logic in here that would still make a valid SQL syntax, and it would submit it, right? And in some way we could like have like a drop table in here, main or something like that. If someone knew how your table was set up, they could put their own SQL into your SQL and run it, which is really insecure. So how do we kind of get around that? Well, we have this set up working. We can do a bit of filtering on whatever they submitted. So let's do a what's it called? And compare PHP. Okay. Let's do a regular expression. So what if I say if reg match, then we'll do this. And in preg match, we need the returns 1 if patterns for 0 is not found or false on error. Stops after the first match is found, making it efficient for simple validation. Optional third argument matches can be provided as an array to store the found matches. Okay. So I believe we just put submitted in here, and then we would have a regular expression that we were matching this against. So if we were checking against like an email, it would look like this, supposedly. Regular expression, only letters. How about that? Okay, something like this. Okay, so this is a regular expression. Think like that. And we're saying if this, what was submitted, matches this regular expression. And I'm not going to go over regular expressions right now. You can look them up more if you desire, but it's a way of essentially filtering letters and things from strings to ensure that you have the information you're looking for, or you can use it to search for information in a string. There's a lot of reasons you would want to learn regular expressions, but I'm not going to teach them at the moment. I'm just kind of showing you could try and filter it like this. Preg match limiter must be alphanumeric / or null. we are supposed to put the regular expression first. Okay, now it's working. So we're saying we have this regular expression. If floaty boat, which is what was submitted, matches that regular expression, then we're going to fetch the stuff from the table because we're going to trust it that it's not SQL syntax, and we'll put it in here, right? Now, you can really cater your regular expression, be super fine-tuned with it to make sure everything's great, but there's still a possibility that even just using like letters or something, they can do some SQL injection of some kind. We need to like minimize that risk as much as possible, right? So there's something called prepared statements. And I like prepared statements a lot more in PHP than doing these raw strings. And in college, they're only going to teach you this raw string way, which it infuriates me because there is a more secure way of doing it, which is prepared statements. So we need to do this a bit differently. We're going to move this down so you can kind of see like old way of doing it. This is not how you should do it. The way we want to do it is we want to say we're making a statement. And that's going to be equal to your connection prepare, and then you're going to put your SQL in here. Now you could still make a SQL string here and then put SQL here. I like just putting it into the prepare, but we're going to write a very similar syntax to this. We're going to say select all from main where name equal, and we're just going to put a question mark. And I'll explain that in just a second. So then we need to do statement bind param, and we're going to say s comma space $ submitted. And then we can do statement execute. And I believe we can get a result from that. And then similarly, we can do this check after that and paste it. Let's see if that works as I intended. It does not. Prepared statement, select E. I wish AI was able to give me a more thorough answer. We execute. Okay, so the result is going to be its own thing. We're going to execute it, and then the result is going to be our statement get result, like that. Okay, now you see we get the same thing, right? Because the old version is printing them down here, the new version is printing them up here. But let me explain some things. We never said submitted in our actual query syntax, right? What we did was we said this is our SQL syntax, but I'm not injecting anything into it yet because I need you to know what I'm trying to do first before I'm going to give you the values I'm trying to put in. Then bind param, the first bit is a string, and it's going to be the types of data you want to put in. So here I'm saying S because that's a string. And then after this string that says what types we're putting in, I'm putting the actual variable or value that I'm trying to inject to this SQL string. And that's going to replace the question marks in this string from left to right. So if I said like where that is that and like nickname equals, I'd have another question mark. I'd put another S in here, and then I'd have like nickname here. So submitted will replace this one. Nickname will replace this one. And then I believe like D, I believe, is for digits. So if you were doing numbers, you'd do a D instead. But S is strings, and that's what we were working with. So this is a much, 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 much more secure way of doing SQL statements to and from your database using PHP. And I highly, highly recommend you look up prepared statements. You figure out how to do inserts, selects, and updates using prepared statements. This is such a like insecure way of doing it if you're going to be doing something like an online store or something. But in school, they don't care. They teach you the insecure way and hope that you figure out the secure way later for some reason. So yeah, I do not recommend doing this unless you are, just writing something for yourself or you highly, highly, highly trust the person that's going to be using your service or something like that. If you are going to make a secure system, absolutely use prepared statements, please. Please. And do the filter on whatever was submitted. Please, 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 please. Okay. Now that we covered that. I think we covered files, we covered database, we covered local storage and cookies. I think we're going to move away from web now. And we're going to look at Java. Take a quick little drink. Okay. So we don't need this. We don't need this. We're going to open Eclipse. We are still going to need this database though. I do plan on showing you JDBC, which will allow you to also connect to a database using Java. So if you are interested in that, stay posted. So we're going to make a new project. I want a Maven project. Where did it pop up? Sponsor Eclipse. Not right now. I just want like a simple project. Use the default location. Enter a group ID. I don't know. Com dot Floaty. Why am I struggling with this? Enter a group ID for the artifact. Okay. I'm just having like a brain stroke. All right. So we made this new project. We called it Floaty, apparently. And it's a simple Maven project. Make a new class. Oh my gosh. Source folder is not a Java project. I haven't done this in Eclipse before. Oh, I think we're waiting for it to generate stuff. Yeah. Make a new package. I call it core. Okay. Okay, we'll see how this works. I'll make a new main function. System out print line. Hello world. Let's try running it. Okay, it runs. So we have our files in the right place. So there's a couple different ways that you can save and load data in Java. One is files, similar to like PHP. How you would do that is you're going to define a file. I'm going to make a new file. And I'm going to say like health.txt, something like that. We'll import file. Now, a file is not actually a file. It's a path to a file. So I could put like C:\\/ users, whatever. Like this can be a file or it can be a directory. Like it can really be anything. It's just a path to a location on your system. So then we need to say if file.isFile. This is checking if there actually is a file at this path. Then, we can say like file exists, right? So let's just run it. And we don't get anything out because this file doesn't actually exist yet, right? Well, we can say file output stream FOS is a new file output stream, and we can feed it this file object here. It's a new file output stream. And then it's mad because it wants to surround with try and catch. Now it's going to do this try and catch for us by default. And I'm going to change some things. I'm going to say exception. So if there's any kind of exception, we're going to catch the exception. And then we have something in Java called try with resources. And if we just cut this and paste it in there, is that going to work? Resource specification not allowed here for source level below 1.7. Okay, apparently we were compiling for a outdated version of Java. Thank you, Miltreta13, for following. I really appreciate it. We're getting closer to our affiliate goal. Thank you a lot. Yeah. Hello, Miltreta. How's it going? So now we're trying with resources, which appears to only work above Java 7. But pretty much everyone should be above 7 these days. I don't know why Maven's default archetype is like 7. That's kind of weird. But anyway. So what are we doing here? Well, we're making a file output stream. meaning we have kind of a tube that is pointing to a file. And so we're pointing to this file that we made, which is going to be health.txt. So we have a tube that points to file or health.txt. Now we can use this tube in a couple different ways. The easiest one is using the scanner class, which I'm not sure if we actually need a file output stream for this. Let's check it out. What if I feed this FOS? Is it going to be angry with me? Yes. Okay, so we could say file here, and now we have a scanner, and then we would want to close the scanner when we're done. Let's just check out this scanner way first, and then I'll show you the file output stream way, because it's a bit more complicated. So we're making this scanner, and a scanner we also need to surround with try and catch. Your English isn't very good, but you're learning it. You're also learning programming. Which program are we going to make? Right now, we're kind of teaching how to like save and load from files. And we've already discussed how to do it using like JavaScript, HTML, PHP, and then communicate between all of those things in order to save and load to different locations that we desire. Right now, we're in Java and we're explaining how to save and load from files. And then after we do files, I'm hopefully going to show you how to do it from a database as well, which is one of the ways that we did with the web programming. So we were going to try with resources this scanner, because I don't plan on using the scanner outside of this try block. And again, we're just going to cut this back to exception. Okay. So a scanner is sort of a text-based file reader. So we can just say scanner dot, and you'll find wait, can we not write with a scanner? I thought we could. I think I'm thinking of a buffered writer, is what I'm thinking of. I wouldn't say it's necessarily difficult, but it is quite a bit of work to set up. Like there's a lot of interworking pieces that need to speak with each other in order to pass the information to and from the locations that you're trying to save or load from. So again, I think we're going to need to do something different for now, and I'll explain the scanner in a second. Let's try making a buffered writer. Buffered writer. BW equals new buffered writer. Import it. And this needs possibly this output stream. So we're going to play around with this a little bit. I don't normally use files. I normally use, we need a writer. All right, I'm going to Google this. Buffered writer Java. It might be a print writer that I'm thinking of. Well, one way we can do it is we can say new file writer. Let's say health.txt, and then we won't need this file output stream. Import file writer. Okay, so we have a file writer to our text file, and then we have a buffered writer that wraps that. And then we can say buffered writer dot write, and then we can put text here. So I'll say like Joe or something like that, and then bw dot new line, and then we'll say like bw dot write 100, something like this. Okay. And we are not using the scanner in this way. Okay, so we have a file that we ended up not using, but we're checking if it exists. If it does exist, it'll say it exists, right? If it doesn't exist, then it's not going to say anything. But then we have this buffered writer that is going to write to health.txt the word Joe, a new line character, and then 100. So let's try this. We're running that. Now the question is, where on our system is it going to store that file? Whoops, what just happened? Okay, so it's probably going to be in our project. It wrote it here. If we look inside, it says Joe new line 100, right? Which is exactly what we told it to write. And now this file exists on our system. So, and it should probably show up somewhere in here, but I don't see it. So now if we run it again, we'll see the file exists this time around. That's because when you write to a file, it actually creates the file if the file didn't exist before. So now we have this file. Why don't we try to read the file, which is what a scanner is used for. So we have a scanner, and we're going to say scanner dot has next while it has next. Then we're going to say system out print line scanner dot next line. How about that? So if we run now, we see the file exists, but we're also printing Joe and 100 because the scanner is finding the file. And then while the file has characters that we haven't processed yet, it's going to read the full line in the file and print that line into our console. So a combination of buffered writer, file writer, and a scanner will give you, two different ways of accessing your file. You can either write to the file or read from the file this way. Now, there's times where you can't use text. Like you need to store, read, and write byte information. And that's the way that I normally access files. So we're going to take a look at that. So let's get rid of these. Like hopefully you can screenshot or something real quick before I delete them. But we're going to get rid of those. And we're going to look at the way that I normally do it, which is a file output stream that points to the file we defined. Now we can say FOS, which is our file output stream, dot and it is, I believe, write. Yes, we can write. And then in here is going to be an array of bytes. Now there's multiple different ways that you can get an array of bytes. Let's say you're storing them in like a buffered output stream or a buffered input stream or something like that. Several different ways I'm not going to explain at the moment, but this would be if you have an array of bytes. An easy way to get an array of bytes is to make a string. I'll say like hello world, and then you say dot get bytes, because this get bytes returns a byte array, right? And it's going to be the bytes that make up the word hello, or the phrase hello world. And then after you write, you want to flush. Flush essentially means everything that's in the process of being written to whatever file or stream or anything that we're writing to, we want to make sure that it finishes getting through that tube before we close up what we're doing. So now if I run the program, the file does exist from our previous interactions with it, but let's actually look at the file. It says hello world now, because we wrote the bytes to this file that make up the words hello world. And we can do like a new line character and say like my name is Joe or something like that, right? And when I run this program again, let me close Notepad. When I run it again and then check it, now we have a new line and then my name is Joe. So we're successfully writing text to this file. But as I said, this way can also be used to write byte arrays, which means you can write any kind of information to a file this way. And that's why this is my preferred way of writing. Now, we also need to read from the file, right? Let's do my file input stream, FIS, file input stream, and we'll do it on the same file. And then import file input stream, and then we need a catch on this try, and everything's happy. So now we're going to read. Well, we have fis.read, but that's only going to read 1 byte of the file. So we need to read all of the bytes of the file. An easy way to do that is dot, it is called read all bytes. And this will read all of the bytes from the file into a byte array. But if we say string, like phrase or whatever, equals new string, and we wrap this into a string, it's going to take this byte array and convert it into a string, and then we can use this string, right? So let's system out print line phrase, and let's run that. Okay, file exists, and then we write hello world, my name is Joe to it. And then we're going to read all of the bytes that make up that text, and we're going to print it out to the screen. So we see hello world, my name is Joe. So we've successfully wrote to and read from files a different way, but this is using bytes specifically, which is much better in my opinion, and can use different character encoding types. I believe you could specify different encoding types using the print writer and stuff, but I don't really like doing that. I like just knowing what it is and interacting with it as if it were that character set encoding. So this is definitely how I would prefer to read and write from files. And then you can, again, just create your own little file structure, being like, this is the player folder. Inside the player folder, we have like health.txt, whatever. Or you could also maybe separate your data by new lines. You could say like the health is 100, or let's say like the X is 100, and then the Y is like 200. And then when you read this in, it's going to look like this, right? Well, you could do like a string array phrases is phrase.split, and you could split this on the new line character, and then you could say like for string word in phrases, then we want to system print line word, and when we run this, it gives us the same output, but we've split that information by new line characters. So we could say like something like player dot x equals phrases 0, and then player dot y is phrases 1, right? And the structure is always going to be the same because you are going to always write it the same as the way you're going to read it. And that's just a standard that you're going to have to upkeep from now on, is to make sure that every time you save it, you're saving it in the same way that you're loading it. But you could store all of your information in one file that way. So you have like a player.txt or something, and all of the player's information is saved in that txt, that kind of thing. There's a lot of complicated setups that we could do. I'm not going to explain all of them. I'll leave that to you to kind of explore. We're going to move on to database access, which is going to be slightly more complicated. And I'm going to have to interact with Maven, which does not make me too happy because I have not done that in Eclipse yet. So we're going to open our pom.xml. And you can do what we're doing without Maven, but you're going to have to add this plugin to your class path instead of in your POM file. So I want to add JDBC to POM. So we need the MySQL connector J that looks like this. Dependencies is the section that this would be under. And it says replace with current version. So we need to find the latest JDBC version. Latest MySQL connector J version. It looks like it's 9.6 is the latest. So let's try putting that in here. Delete this. Okay. Now, can we go to Maven? I think it's update project. Okay. All right. Hopefully that's good enough. So then we're going to say MySQL connector J. Connect to database. Okay. So let's make a string, which is a URL. And this is going to be the location of our database. which is written in a special format. We have JDBC, MySQL, because we're using a MySQL database. It might be like MariaDB or something if you're using a different kind of database. 3306 is the port that our server is running at. Localhost is the IP. And then we need our database name, which in our case was stream. We are not going to use SSL, and we can have auto reconnect on. I'm just going to delete this bit, and I don't think we need this bit either. So we'll just do that, and that is a string. What are the basics of Java? With languages like Java or C or anything like that that's more low level, I'd say the basics are like variables, functions, that sort of thing. And it's a lot of console work. It's just like printing to the console, getting information from the user from the console, that kind of stuff. And that will get you into working with the languages. After that, you kind of need to know what you want to pursue with the language. Do you want to make windows? Do you want to play audio? Do you want to, connect to databases, that sort of thing? And from the point of knowing functions and variables and things, you just need to explore those options that you want to do, and you'll pick it up over time essentially. Like just Google a lot about what you want to do in the language that you're trying to do it in and see how other people are doing it, and then see how you can adjust what they're doing to fit the purposes that you desire. But yeah, I'd look up like a Java crash course or something like that on YouTube if you just want the basics. This part of the stream is mostly for people who are already familiar with Java, but maybe don't know how to use Java in a game development sort of way, you know? So anyway, I was answering some chat questions. We need this URL. This is going to be the location that we're trying to connect to. And then we need to have a username and password. Username we said was Bob. Password was hello to connect to our database. Then we need to make a connection. So we're going to try with resources to make a connection. We're going to call con, similar to in PHP. Driver manager get connection. And we're going to put our URL as the connection here. And then we also need the username and password passed to it as well. And then this is there. Why is this written so weird? Google is writing this really weird. So we're going to try with resources here. Import all the stuff we need. We need to change project compliance. We need to add a throws or a catch, which we will do here. Catch. Usually this would be a SQL exception E, but I like just doing exception because it grabs a more broad range of exceptions, and we're just gonna print stack trace it anyway. Okay, so that should make a connection to our database and use our username and password, so it will be authenticated. And then we need to make a statement. St or The MT, which is what I like, is con.create statement. Import that. We want the probably the SQL one. Then result set. Result is going to be the statement execute query, and then we would put a query in here. Let's import that result set. So let's just make a string, which is going to be our query, just to kind of separate it out so we're not taking up so much space. We'll put query in here. Let's select all from main as our first query. And then processing the result set, we need to say while result.next. So while there is a next result to process, then we can get the values by saying result.get the type we're looking for. So we'll say string, and this will be the column that you're trying to fetch. So in our database, as it stands now, right here, we have main, which we're querying here, right? We have name and nickname that we can grab, and ID as well. So let's just say name here, nickname, ID, but ID is not going to get string. We're going to get int of ID here, nickname, and this would be how we access all of the columns of our table. Now let's just system out print line result. Sometimes Eclipse does not help. And then we're going to do the same thing, but with get string and name. And then the same thing, but with nickname. Okay, so if this is all working, if this is all valid code, we're connecting using JDBC to our MySQL database at the location localhost port 3306, and we're accessing the stream database. We're using the username and password that is affiliated with that database to create a connection. Then we're going to make a statement. We're going to execute this query inside of that statement. And then the results of that query, we're going to print out to our console here. Let's give it a run. And it worked. Everything actually worked. It's all lined up. We had our Maven set up JDBC properly, and everything is fantastic. So any select statement that we put in here now is going to be grabbing from this table as intended. Let's even let's insert another one just for fun. We're going to say their name is Joe and their nickname is Jonathan or something like that, which is funny because the nickname is longer than the actual name. Now let's run it again. Boom. Now we have one Floaty Boat and Floaty, and then two Joe and Jonathan, because in our database we have two, and we're looping through all of them. And again, we could just say like where ID equals 2, and when we run it now, we only get Jonathan because Jonathan's ID is 2, right? So similarly, you can insert things, of course. So let's try to do that. Let's say insert into main, name, nickname, values, And we'll say, I don't know, Billy and Bob. And then we're going to execute this query, but there's not going to be a result set, right? Because this is an insert. So let's see, check if JDBC insert was successful. How about that? So instead of execute query here, we're going to say execute update. I know it's an insert, but we are updating the database. And then this is going to be an integer of how many rows were affected by the update. Now, if rows affected is greater than 0, then we know we've affected the database, right? So system out print line inserted values. Else we can say like we failed or something like that, right? So now we're going to make our connection. We're going to do an insert, inserting these values to the database. And then we're going to execute that insert. We're going to check if we actually managed to do that insert or not. If we did, then we'll print we inserted the values. If we didn't, we'll say we failed. So let's check this out. Let's run this. It says inserted values. Let's check to make sure that actually happened. If we refresh this, now we have Billy and Bob in here. So that's fantastic. We managed to use JDBC in order to connect to a database, insert things into it, and get things out of it, which again is saving and loading data, right? So that's fantastic. We managed to do that. And then if you are a bit weary of using Maven because your project normally would not put this dependency in your jar, there's actually a way you can get the dependencies in your jar. We're going to say create fat jar Maven. That's what it is called when you include your dependencies in with your jar, is you're making a fat jar. So let's look at this. There are plugins that we can use. So if we say plugins, is this not where you put plugins? Should be in build. Okay. Now we need the latest Maven assembly plugin. And I recommend just looking up like Maven assembly plugin or create fat jar pom or something like that will bring you to this information. But let's look up latest Maven assembly plugin version. It says 3.8.0. So we'll say 3.8.0 for the version. And we are assembling it all into a single package. Jar with dependencies is our descriptor. And we save. We would update our Maven. Okay. And now when we export, we should have JDBC inside of our project. So it runs properly. We are inserting the values. I just inserted the same thing again. So you will see we have duplicate Billy Bob. Every time I run this, it'll add another one. And executing updates will be the same way as doing this insert. You'll just change this to be an update statement instead of a insert. But yeah, that is the two ways that I would do it in Java, is either using files or using a database. I definitely recommend database because it's easier to manage your data later on. But yeah, that was kind of the plan for today. And we kind of covered it already. Maybe look at adding it to our project without Maven. How about that? So let's delete this project we made because I don't need it anymore. Let's make a new project that is just going to be a Java project. We're going to call it test connect or something like that. Okay. In test connect, we have source. We're going to make a new package called core. And in here, we're going to make a new class called main that has our main method in here. So system out print line. We're just going to do some gibberish. It's nice to do this when you first start a project because it will tell you which project runs when you do your run button. So we know that this project is the one that's running. Let's look at adding add JDBC to class path Eclipse. This could get kind of complicated because I do not do this. So Google download JDBC. Okay, we are on Windows, which doesn't appear to be an option here. The classes for randomness or JDBC.jar. Okay, we're gonna try this. Let's open this phone folder. So I just downloaded the JDBC. We need to put it somewhere that we know. We're gonna put it on the desktop for now, since this is just a test. And then now that we have it on the desktop, as you can see, it's on the desktop. I'm going to close this and reopen this. We need to right-click our project in the package manager. So this test connect, we need to right-click it, go to properties. In properties, Java build path, which is this one. Then go to the libraries tab. Okay. Click the add external jars. We're gonna need to click class path first, I believe. Add external jars. We're gonna select our JDBC jar that we downloaded. Okay, we're gonna say apply and close. Now, supposedly, we can write the same code. So we're gonna try that. We're gonna try to make a connection con. So new connection. We're gonna attempt to import. Okay, it looks like we are making a connection. Let's go back to making a connection. Connect to database JDBC. Okay. Again, we need this structure string. We're gonna call it host. Is this? So it's JDBC, MySQL. We are connecting to the stream database. And we are making a connection to host using the username Bob and the password of hello. This is probably wanting the, cannot instantiate the, oh, because we're not instantiating it. It's driver manager dot get connection. And then we need to import driver manager. This is a try catch exception e dot print stack trace. Okay, there appears to be no issues at the moment. We may have successfully added it to our class path. Let's continue. So we need to say we needed to make a statement, right? Statement, new statement, the SQL statement. It's probably con dot create statement. Yes. Statement dot execute query. This was going to be a query and result set. Result is going to be that. We're importing result set. Select all from main is going to be our query. And then while result dot next, then we are going to system out print line result dot get string name. Okay, nothing's highlighted or anything. It looks like this is gonna work. So if we run this, uh-oh, no suitable driver found. That means we didn't find the SQL driver that we tried to load. So we did not successfully add it to our project. Because you need to add the jar to the project's Java build path, download it, save it to a local folder. Many people create a lib folder inside their Eclipse project directory. Let's just kind of run through the things again. We went to build path, libraries, class path. Maybe it's not the class path. Maybe it's the module path. Let's try that. Let's remove, apply and close. Now let's try to run it. It's still not working. So we're gonna need to do some searching. Download the zip from here, extract it, copy the jar file to right click on the property, say build path, add external archives jar file the program. You can directly connect the database performance steps, MySQL extract files, place the file in the folder in program files, add this library on prior to right clicking it. Does not appear to be working as they are saying it does. What PHP is this? Honestly, MySQL has been in PHP for like several versions now. Probably like 5 and above, I'd guess. Let me Google it. When was MySQL added to PHP? Yeah, MySQL has been part of PHP since PHP 5, which was in 2004. So yeah, it's been around for quite a while now. And I believe prepared statements were even in the MySQL class before MySQL was a thing. I want to Google that too. When was prepared statements added to PHP? It was in PHP 5. So it seems like prepared statements came to PHP with MySQL. So the PHP 5 has been around for quite a while now, and prepared statements should come along with that as well, if that's what you're wondering. If you're looking at this kind of stuff right now, this isn't PHP, this is Java. But it functions in a similar way to PHP, where we're connecting to the same database we made earlier. We've kind of moved on to a different segment of the stream where we're doing Java instead of PHP. How? Oh, you were kidding. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, man. This PHP is a little weird, isn't it? Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what we're doing wrong with this class path thing. So I always just use Maven for this. Let's see, can you guys hear my Chrome? You cannot right now, which is what I was going for. Let's go to YouTube and watch a quick little video. Let's see. Okay. Hopefully this 3-minute video will solve all my problems. Let's even speed it up. Okay. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. This might be the part that I was looking for. We're going to do class for name MySQL CJ JDBC driver. And probably surround try catch. Let's try and run it now. It's still not working. So that is not what was missing for us. Continue. Okay. Okay. Perhaps we've downloaded the wrong driver. Let's delete this one. Let's go and fetch a different one. So we say download JD BC driver. And we were going to this website, which is the official website. You go to archives, you say platform independent, and then we need to download the zip to our desktop. When that is finished, then we need to extract this. And this will be the file we're trying to get right here. So let's go back here. Let's right click properties. We're going to go here, there. We're going to remove this because it's not what we're looking for. Class path, add external. We want to go in here and select this jar, apply and close. Now let's just try to run it. And it actually works. So we had the wrong driver. And that was the issue. Okay, so now that I've shown you how to get the correct driver, all you do is you right click, you go to properties, you go to Java build path, libraries, click on class path, make sure you clicked on class path, say add external jars, click the connector that you downloaded. It will add it to this class path list. Just apply and close, and then all of the code that you were writing before should work. So yeah, that's how you do it without using Maven. If you hate Maven for some reason. But yeah, I'm trying to think other ways you could save your game data. Um, that's really about it. Like, if you had an active server that was storing information in RAM and stuff, that server itself would also need to either write files or to a database. So I've already shown you how to do that. I'll show you kind of a server client connection another day. For like 2 Java programs. But yeah, I think I'm probably gonna wrap it up for this week. So yeah, I appreciate everyone who has come to the stream. I'm going to stop all the servers and everything. Maybe I should sync this to the GitHub, just so you have kind of a base idea of how to access things. I think I'll do that. So I'll sync the Java ones to the GitHub. What do we have in Z? I said I would sync the saving the game project, so I'll probably do that. Maybe the prepared statement ones as well, because I think that is useful for you guys to know. So I will try to sync those to the GitHub. But yeah, I appreciate everyone who's come, everyone who's typed in chat. If you ever have any questions about anything, feel free to ask me. I'll probably know the answer. If I don't, I'll probably know where to send you to find the answer. But this has been saving and loading your game data. Honestly, with the things that I've shown you in this stream and the previous streams, I think you guys can make a ballin' video game. If you want to know where to start, I recommend checking out the HTML JavaScript Cube Wars stream that I did. If that is not on Twitch or Kick, then it will be on the YouTube. Unfortunately, on my streaming channels, I can only store VODs for about 7 days before they are deleted. So I am permanently uploading them to the YouTube, just in case you guys need to go back and watch other streams, you weren't here for it live, or you didn't take notes, or something along those lines. I stream Monday to Friday, so if you are looking forward to seeing me in the future, that is when I do stream, usually in the morning. I am in America, so maybe morning's not so morning for you. Um, but yes, I do plan on streaming every day, Monday to Friday. If something comes up and I cannot be at the stream, please check the Twitter. If I haven't been around for a while, if you're waiting for me or something, check the Twitter. If I'm sick or something comes up, I will post on the Twitter if I am not streaming that day. If I have not posted, please just assume that I'm still going to be streaming for that day. My start times vary within like 3 hours or so, but usually before noon is when I start, at least in my time zone, which is Mountain. So, yeah. Uh, I I've been toying around with the idea of making like a full game next week. Like a full like audio, images, all that stuff, and just taking a whole week to do like a massive game. So we will see what I think about that next week. But yeah, thank everyone for coming again. If you're not following at the moment, please do follow. We are trying to reach affiliate, and affiliate means that I will get paid to do this. And if I'm paid to do this, I'll feel more like continuing to do it, you know? But yeah, thanks everyone for coming again. I hope you have a good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And I will see you all next week. Goodbye.